This is the Project Cambridge podcast.
Hi, we're back again with another episode 9, I believe. Yes, episode 9 of the Project Cambridge podcast. And it's lovely to have you joining us again today. It's absolutely tipping down with rain outside, so please excuse any horrible rain noises. Today's guest is Tim Minshall, sorry Tim, from the Institute of Manufacturing here in Cambridge, and we're delighted to have Tim on the podcast, and I'm going to introduce him properly in a couple of minutes. First, just a few words of housekeeping. So if you're new to the podcast, we're providing an inclusive and accessible focus on Cambridge. So that could be, and it is today, covering lots about technology and science, but it's also about how the city's growing and how you can get involved. And we're passionate about making things really simple to understand. We want you to find it straightforward and hopefully even interesting. I really want to encourage anybody to put any comments or questions that you've got in the comments box. We want to get your feedback, and Tim and I are happy to get back to anybody who wants any information. Last but not least, I warned you about the rain, but this isn't recorded in a podcast studio. And if you've seen or listened to the podcast before, you'll know that the cats do like to get involved, and occasionally the doorbell rings and Amazon turns up and anything like that. So we're not too worried about that. So we're just going to go straight into things, and I'd love to introduce you all, and I'll promise to get your name right this time, Tim. Professor Tim Minshall from the Institute for Manufacturing in Cambridge. Hi, Tim.
Hi, Jen. Great to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me along.
You're very welcome.
And by the way, never be embarrassed about getting the name wrong. I've usually been introduced so far as Tim Minchin, the Australian musical comedian. That's a good one. Very often Tim Marshall, the guy who wrote the books on geography. In fact, people are quite disappointed when they realise that, they go, "Oh, you're the guy who wrote the book. Oh, but not those books. Oh, that's disappointing." So I'm quite used to it.
Well, I'll do my best to address you as I should do. So first of all, I want to talk about your job title, because I think it's probably one of the longest job titles I've ever seen. So you are the Dr. John C. Taylor, Professor of Innovation at the University of Cambridge, Head of the Institute for Manufacturing, Head of the Institute for Manufacturing Centre for Technology Management, and you're also a Fellow of the Churchill College. Tim, can you just sum that up to what you actually do?
I'm not entirely sure, but one thing is absolutely true is I have the most wonderful colleagues. And one of them, when I got this job, they put a little sign on my door, and it's a little graph, and it sits right underneath the little sign saying who I am outside the door. And it says, on the one axis, it says length of job title, and the other axis, it says grip on reality. And they've drawn a curve that goes like this, indicating exactly where they think I am.
That's brilliant. So what is it that you do?
Very good question. So I have basically two jobs. One is I am this place called the Institute for Manufacturing, which is part of the engineering department here at Cambridge University. It has one very simple mission, which is to help manufacture a better world. And we do that through education, through research, and through working very closely with industry and government to deliver solutions and work out what problems need solving. So that's one part of the job. And my predecessor used to say, when asked the same question, so what do you actually do though? And he went, drains and car parks, which I thought was a nice summary of the role, but we have more than just drains and car parks. So it's all about trying to make sure we provide an environment that is there to respond to the needs of industry, to respond to the needs of government, and to make sure we have a constant flow of really the most enthusiastic, bright people going into manufacturing to help manufacture a better world. That's one part of the job. So that's the Institute for Manufacturing bit. That makes sense? Is that okay?
Yep.
And then the other bit all relates to this piece of technology here. So this is, I'll put it up there, right over there. That is an electric kettle controller. So it's an old-fashioned kettle where you can see the pin. So you'd shove your cable in there and the kettle would be like this.
Yeah.
And this little switch here, bear with me, it won't take long, this I promise, is the controller for your electric kettle. So steam passes over this and makes it go click and switch off your, so that would be on, and the steam would pass over this piece of metal, and it's two different bits of metal together which make it go bend and click. That technology was invented by Dr. John C. Taylor. Dr. John C. Taylor made significant returns from inventing and building the machines and selling billions of these, that he was able to make. He's a very generous benefactor. He's given money to the university. And one of the things that ended up happening was he wanted there to be a professor of innovation and for it to be involved in engineering and manufacturing. So by a strange series of turns of fate and mistaken identity, I ended up getting that job. So I'm the Dr. John C. Taylor Professor of Innovation at the Engineering Department and head of the Institute for Manufacturing. And these two roles combine. So it's one job effectively. I could have just said that.
That's really cool. And anybody watching on video on YouTube today, thank you for showing us that little prop there. If you are listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, go and find out what a kettle switch kind of looks like for a little bit more insight there. Anyway, so I'm noting that you started lecturing at the University of Cambridge, and this is way back in 2002. But you started your PhD again at the Department of Engineering back in the early 90s. So you've been around us for over 30 years. I know you're from Norfolk, aren't you? So can you walk us through your education, early years, and what brought you over the border?
So Jen, you're making me feel really, really like I've been around for a very long time.
Sorry.
I love the T-shirt that's going around at the moment, which says, "It's so weird being the same age as old people." I quite like that. So the journey, a quick version is, went to primary school in a very rural part of Norfolk near Downham Market, tiny little village called Boughton, where I had two classrooms, literally two classrooms, two teachers. There was the little class and the big class, two wonderful teachers there, one of whom I'm still in touch with. Mrs. Miller, Nargis Miller, she's still around, lives just near Ely. Went from there, primary school, to secondary school in Methwold. That was lovely, a great school there. And then I moved to Downham Market to the sixth form there. And all the way through, my destiny had been to become a pilot, because I've got three older brothers. One's a naval officer, one was a naval officer, one was an army officer, one was an officer in the Royal Marines. And that left the Air Force for me. Yep. So I thought, right, so I joined the Air Cadets in Downham Market 1018 Squadron, and I went for my first flight at Minshall here in Cambridge, and it was a beautiful sunny day, unlike today, and we took off, and it was wonderful. And the pilot was this character from a movie. He had a proper silver moustache. He was just great. He was a retired pilot, and he said, "First time up, is it, Sonny?" And I went, "Yes, sir." He went, "Right, let's have some fun." So straight up into down, loop the loop, came out of the loop into a couple of barrel rolls and up into another loop. Yeah, sort of wow, but sort of I don't feel very well moment. So we agreed that it was probably better to stop doing that. And then as he came out and leveled off, the engine failed.
No.
And so the plane started off over there to the south, over to the east of Cambridge, the airport, and ended up having to land at Waterbeach, because the engine had failed and they couldn't get back to Cambridge, couldn't fly over the town. So we did a forced no engine landing at Waterbeach on the disused runway. And the fire engines turned up and they hoiked me out, and it was all very dramatic. And I thought, I'm not sure this is the career for me. Also, I was quite short-sighted and, wasn't the ideal pilot. So I decided I wanted to fly. I wanted to travel. And I thought, well, if I become an engineer looking at aero engines, that would be good. But I ended up studying mechanical engineering at Aston in Birmingham. And then I thought, I'm not sure I want quite ready to start being looking at jet engines. And so I went off, worked in Australia, making aluminium foil, which was very, really interesting, about how do you make a product that we see in our lives every day. How do you make it? What does a rolling mill for aluminium foil look like? And I did my work placement in Australia, which was great. Came back, finished, went off to Japan. Actually trained as an English teacher because I just wanted to travel. I realized I didn't really want to be a pilot. I wanted to travel.
Yeah.
Got to Japan, and that was transformative, because then I got to see living in a place where manufacturing, the making of things, is a very visible and central part of life. As maybe we'll come back to it later, but there's this issue of somehow in the UK we've sort of lost sight of that a little bit, but seeing it in Japan where it's absolutely front and center. Things are made, manufacturing is respected, it is an integral part of society, of the economy, of culture, and everybody appreciates that. And then, having done that, came back, and that's where it picks up where you just mentioned, starting a PhD here at Cambridge Engineering Department.
Wow, that is such a story. The bit about going on the plane for the first time, that must have been terrifying. Absolutely terrifying.
Yeah. Well, as perhaps I should have been a bit braver and gone, I'm sure the next time will be fine. But I thought, I'm not sure this is for me.
Well, I can understand why you didn't follow in your brother's footsteps anyway. So, Tim, I was lucky. Now, it was very different to today. It was a very, very warm day, wasn't it? Back in August this year over at the West Hub.
Yes, I remember that well.
And Tim, let me tell the viewers and listeners. So Tim was speaking it was a Cambridge Network event, as I say, over at the West Hub. Fantastic event. There was a really diverse group of people in the room. From all sorts of types of businesses. And Tim did a superb job of really explaining manufacturing to anybody across all different levels. And this is kind of the reason that I wanted you, Tim, to come on the podcast, because it was such a diverse group, but you were able to really explain everything so that everybody found it super interesting. You had your props, and I know you've got some more props with you today, and loads of informative slides, and I found it fascinating, but just really impressed how truly passionate you are about it. So before we go in and talk a bit more about manufacturing as a whole, what got you interested in, you mentioned about the aluminium foil, but what got you interested in manufacturing per se?
It's a great question, and thank you for your kind words about the Cambridge Network event. I was so nervous about doing that because the Cambridge crowds can be quite tough sometimes because you've got so much experience, so many amazing things happen in Cambridge. It's never easy to walk into a room of people from all different backgrounds in Cambridge and think, can I say anything that people won't go, well, we know that. Thank you that it seemed to go all right. I think it was genuinely that period of living for a couple of years in Japan and seeing this moment. And it was one particular anecdote. So one of the companies I was working with was the Mazda car company, and they're based in Western Japan, in Hiroshima, which is where I was living. And I remember going along there, and this was the year where they did something absolutely mind-blowing. They had decided that they would build a racing car. So, not the easiest thing to do at the best of times. And they built a particular car and they entered it into the Le Mans 24-hour race. And to everyone's surprise, I suspect theirs as well, they won it. I think they came something like first, third, and seventh or something. I mean, this is against, Ferrari, Lamborghini, Porsche, Mercedes, Jaguar, Aston Martin, from nowhere to doing this. And I thought, wow, this is engineering. This is manufacturing at the highest level.
Yeah.
At the same time, Mazda was facing enormous financial challenges, so bad that it was actually taken over by the Ford Motor Company. And I couldn't quite understand this. I thought, but when I was at university and when I was studying at school, people would say, if you've got the best technology, if you're the cleverest and do the smartest things, sort of implying that that's everything will be good. Whereas actually the reality is running a business, there's so many other things going on. And in fact, making a few very high performance racing cars is difficult. Making hundreds of thousands of cars targeted at different bits of the market that need to adapt to different consumer needs over long years with huge investment is differently hard. And then realizing that so much of manufacturing is not the exciting, let's build a couple of racing cars thing. It's the building the products we need for our lives. And that got me thinking, wow, there's a whole world I don't really understand yet. And that made me think back to the aluminium plant going, well, that's just one product. I mean, it's hard to make it, but it's just aluminium foil. You go into a supermarket and there are typically about an average supermarket has about 30,000 stock keeping units. Now, it's not 30,000 totally different products, but it will be things that are different. not the number of products, but number of different products, 30,000. And each one of them will have an incredibly complex manufacturing story behind it, which is completely invisible to us.
Yeah.
So I think it genuinely was Japan and maybe a bit of Australia, having those experiences of working in a company, working in a factory and going, oh, this is really hard, but also this is incredibly important.
Yeah, wow, that's really cool. And just to dig a little bit deeper on that, at the event with the Cambridge Network event, and you gave some, and this is why I think it appealed to such a diverse group, because you gave some fascinating examples of manufacturing and how it all works, and you focused in on the Fitzbilly's bakery in Cambridge, and how they make the delicious Chelsea buns there. And you'd been there, hadn't you, and actually worked in the kitchen or the bakery to see how these Chelsea buns were made. And myself and another one of the delegates, we actually went and had a Chelsea bun there as a
yeah,
as
not on commission.
You were taught, but it was just, it really made us think, I think, Tim, just really thinking a bit more of those whole global journeys of everyday objects, and how products are made, how it impacts our world. And you made us really ask ourselves the question, how often do we stop and think where we buy these things? Where do they actually come from, and how far across the world have they traveled to get into our shopping bag? And I know a lot of this comes from your book. Tim's book is called Your Life is Manufactured: How We Make Things, Why It Matters, and How We Can Do It Better. So can you tell us a bit more about the book and who that book is for, Tim?
Sure, delighted to. Just one tiny correction, if I may. Customers of Fitzbilly's will no doubt be relieved to hear I didn't actually make any Chelsea buns. I merely watched. They said, you stand over there and you can watch us at 4 o'clock in the morning, but you're not touching anything. Quite rightly too. But the other interesting bit, if I may, just before I answer your question, was also the people involved. It's a very human process. So one of the things that when people sometimes think about manufacturing, they go, oh, it's all production lines and robots and machines. It's a very, very human process. People are involved, and particularly, well, throughout, whether it's a tiny, tiny company and a tiny, tiny factory, or a massive one employing, I don't know, producing 500,000 cars a year. People are at the heart of it. It's about jobs, and manufacturing jobs really matter. And maybe we'll come back to this later when we talk about, manufacturing in Cambridge. But it really, really matters that we understand that manufacturing is a people-driven process. But, sorry, I'll come back to that later maybe. But to answer your question, the reason I wrote the book was it goes back to doing primary schools outreach work.
Yeah.
So we got really interested in thinking, well, as an institute, we should be explaining to people what we do. And I think, every company, every organization should be able to explain to its local community what they do and why it matters and all those things. So we used to go into primary schools, and we had a part of the Cambridge Festival. People come to our institute here, always welcome. Happens on March every year. I won't give you the date because I'll probably get it wrong, but Cambridge Festival, March, Institute of Manufacturing, all welcome. It was listening to the children. So they're, the toughest crowd in the world of those sort of 5 to 11-year-olds. There's no filter. It's just all on. And that's really fun and challenging. But it was genuinely fun. It was enjoyable, and there'd always be great interaction, and they'd just ask great questions. But it was the comments from the teachers and the parents afterwards. And it was something along the lines of, if it went well or didn't go too disastrously wrong, it would be, thank you, that was interesting. And they'd always very often be followed by, but I didn't know that. And so many times you just hear this, but I didn't know that. I thought, oh, well, that's fair enough. I didn't know it when I was doing other jobs. But it's so important. So I've just said it's really important and fundamental to our lives, but so many people are not aware of it. So what can I do? And then COVID hit and we had to stop doing the school's work. And someone said, well, why don't you write down basically the script that you'd use when talking to the primary school kids? And I thought, oh, writing a children's book. And someone said, don't try and write a children's book. It's really, 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 really difficult. Yeah. Although that may change later. So I decided just to write about why those things, what manufacturing is, why it matters, and how we can do it better. And I was really, really surprised the publisher picked up. I was delighted, but surprised that a publisher picked up on it, and that people, seem to want to read it, because it seems to be filling a gap that I didn't think existed. I assumed there were there are lots of TV programs about it. Inside the Factory, all of these, how things are made, on late night, 11 o'clock on Dave. There's great programs about this, but it's sort of targets group people who are already interested in factories.
Yes.
What about the rest of us? What about everyone else? And that's why Inside the Factory and the BBC is a really good, I think, a wonderful program.
It is.
I love it. Cherry baked, right? It's cherry bakewells and chocolate and loo rolls and all this. It's fantastic. We just need more of that. So I wrote the book as to make one tiny, small contribution to changing perceptions. Now, whether it does that, I doubt it, but it's at least starting more conversations about manufacturing, and that really matters, particularly now.
Yeah. And this is what we want to do off the back of this podcast as well. So everybody go and get Tim's book. Is it on Audible as well?
It is, but there's a slight problem with that. You get this for 8 hours. I wouldn't recommend it.
Audible, Amazon, everybody go and buy and read or listen to Tim's book. So we've spoken about how passionate you are about getting young people interested, and you've said before that we need to show people at school what manufacturing is. Get them into factories and seeing how it works. I remember being about 9 or 10 and going to, and you might even know this place, Tim, living up the top of the A10 for all those years. That used to have the Beryl. Is it the Beryl factory?
Oh, in Lynn.
The pens, yeah.
Yes.
And there was a glass. I think there was some kind of glass blowing factory there as well, where they were making bottles. And I can remember being really little, primary age, and going to those factories and seeing how it all worked. But I actually went on to start my own career working in a factory. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but it was easy then, sort of mid-90s, to go and get yourself a job on a production line. And I started putting together single-use medical instruments for theatres and surgeons, and I found it really fascinating. And I was, these instruments, they were for heart surgery and brain surgery and all kinds of different surgery, and it really taught me, not just about surgery and the NHS, but also the supply chain, and what it takes to really get all of these things that we take for granted into hospitals, sterilisation and so on. And I didn't have a degree, but this was really part of my journey, I think, to doing what I'm doing today. And so it was really key, I think, to my career, taking that job. And I wanted to see if you could perhaps shed any light to what other kind of jobs there are that people can do, which are really entry level into manufacturing, where those jobs could perhaps take them in the future.
That's a great question. Maybe before I answer it, I can just give one tiny story from a colleague about the same age as me, who grew up like me in the 1970s, 60s and 70s. And we're talking about how important it is for people to see manufacturing, to do what you did in Lynn, and going to visit the pen factory, and there's an inhaler factory up there and all sorts of great factories up there. But he says, oh yeah, when I was at school, he lived in the West Midlands, he said, oh yeah, we were taken to factories. Oh, well, that's great. And he went, not really, because it wasn't subtle. The teacher said, we're taking you to these factories to show what happens if you don't study hard at school, you'll end up working here.
Wow.
And I was just gobsmacked that was an attitude back in the 70s, which is manufacturing is not something you want to end up in. And it's just so far from where we are now. But somehow, I think there's a little bit of that still. Whereas the truth is, manufacturing is one of the best jobs to get into, however you enter that industry, because it is a highly skilled job. The more you do, the more you learn. The more you learn, the more you can have satisfaction from what you're doing, and you can progress. And there are some wonderful companies that do this so well. And I was down at Duxford last week for Automate UK's Family Day. This is the trade body that represents all the companies that make all the equipment that moves stuff around factories and between factories. It's a very cool organization. And they do a wonderful thing for their member companies and people who work there and their families. Excuse me. And what was brilliant was they could talk about all the high-end, design of robotic systems, but absolutely make it clear that the people involved in everything come from all sorts of different backgrounds. And what was fantastic to see was the people who were running it were the apprentices.
Yeah.
And Domino Printing Sciences from Bar Hill, they were well represented there. And there are all these lovely feeling of this is a thing that is rewarding, that is satisfying, that you can progress your career however you want. And there are multiple entry levels to it. And it's so far removed from that era of the bad factories of the 1970s and 80s, where a lot of the jobs were, frankly, not the sort you'd want your kids to go into because they weren't good. They were low skilled. They were easily done by someone else far away for a much lower price. So it wasn't a secure job at all. But now what we see is whatever entry point you make and you wish to develop your career there, it's a high skilled, high development and well paid job to be doing. And we see that so clearly. I mean, just across East Anglia, the number of factories we visit and go, yep, this is great. There are good jobs there. And good jobs, I mean, that if you get one, you'll be trained, you'll develop your skills. And that means that people are more likely to want to keep you because the investment's gone into your training. They're going to want you to stay. You're going to want to stay as well. So from a government, a local and a regional and a national government point of view, it's really important that we have these manufacturing jobs because they tend to endure. They tend to stay there because all the investment's been there and there's kind of a community build up. Peterborough is a wonderful example.
Yep.
Companies like Perkins, Caterpillar down there, incredible. I forget how many people now work there. It's several hundred. It was well over 1,000. Plus, fantastic relationships with the local FE and technical colleges. So they have this lovely dynamic relationship between what the company needs, people with the skills coming in and are then trained and they go backwards and forwards. So it's at every aspect of manufacturing, there are good jobs to be found.
Yeah, thanks for that. It's really important to remind people that it's not a job for people who didn't do so well at college. People might actually set out to go and work in manufacturing, and so they should do, I think.
And sorry if I can just interrupt. It's such an important point that it is one of the most demanding, high-skilled, high-reward jobs you can do.
Yeah.
And another thing that we've kind of got a little bit wrong in Cambridge, I'd say, is actually advanced manufacturing is one of the biggest sectors in the Cambridgeshire economy. We kind of forget that from time because of how we define it. But also there's the idea that there's the sort of the nerdy science bit will do all the super clever stuff over here, and then someone else will make it. I'm trying to make this point that these both of these worlds are really important, and then yes, they are a bit different. But what you want to do is do the overlap bit. That's what really matters. Because when you have people who understand science and technology, who also understand how to make things, you have this wonderful iteration, this to and fro, going backwards and forwards to say, well, actually, if you're going to do that, well, it's going to be really hard to make it. So why don't you do it this way? And if we design it this way, we could make it a different way. And actually, that means we could target a different type of customer with a, better, faster, cheaper product. We need people who understand both. We need people who get the science, the technology, the design, and we absolutely need people who understand production, and we need those people talking to each other.
Yeah, and there's some companies that are doing a fantastic job of that. I know, if we're talking about Cambridge specifically, we could talk about CMR, Cambridge Medical Robotics. I've heard Mark Stack, one of the founders, speak a couple of times, and he's actually very passionate about getting the whole team working together. That's the manufacturing shop floor right up to the designers and so on, and understands that it is a big team effort, and I think that's really testament to why they're doing so well. And hopefully if they can stay in Cambridge for a long time, that would be marvelous. So we know that Cambridge it's amazing at research. It's pretty good at development. So when it comes to scaling up and manufacturing, what are we not doing so well here, Tim?
Yeah, so I think it's because I'm not doing my job very well. So it's a semi-serious point in a way, because surely it should be so obvious that I wouldn't have to, go charging around talking to people about this and explaining it, because we don't, and in a way, it was disappointing we had that Cambridge Network event and that people were going, oh yeah, we should do that, because it should be so obvious. So I think I'm failing. That's the number one thing. We should note that. But we're trying to make it better by saying, if we can be better at explaining the value of manufacturing as part of the innovation process, so all the way from the basic ideas and the fundamental science, all the way through to products and systems that make our lives better. There's a load of science, there's a load of technology, there's a load of design, and there's a load of production. And I think for Cambridge, for some, that production bit has been taken out and shoved somewhere else, which may make absolute sense. But the more you take away, then the more gaps you have between the science and the technology and the customers who are going to be, working with you on that product and using that product over hopefully a long time. I think we've got to be a little bit better at keeping all of that together. So it's very exciting that we've got Innovate Cambridge.
Yep.
The link between Cambridge activities and Manchester activities. So again, it's also very exciting that we have the great relationship, Cambridgeshire, and Cambridge and Peterborough are so aligned politically. And yes, I know there are a few challenges, but fundamentally that makes a lot of sense, that there are people close by who totally understand the making and people close by who totally understand the science and technology. We just need them more closely aligned. And I think that's something we need to be better at. But it's no good doing it as it should be like this. You've got to explain why it matters. And I think that's the bit that's trickier, because it feels right, it's logical, and you talk to people who do it at that Cambridge Network event. The number of people who came up to me afterwards going, yes, we do this. And it's great, but we should do more of it. Why are we the only company in the sector that actually makes the thing? Or why are we the only company in this sector that has been making this for the last 20 years? It's very tricky. And I think we need to get that message to central government as well, who are doing a brilliant job, and they've got an industrial strategy now and all the great things that are happening and supporting the Oxford to Cambridge arc. That's all great. But to me, it's all about all of these things with manufacturing at its heart. Not, high volume mass production necessarily, but some of the manufacturing to be locally is really, really important. We've got to explain why that matters, why it's so important. And it matters because if you have the people with the ideas for new products and the people who know how to make things talking to each other within a couple of miles of each other, coming together, amazing things happen. And there's evidence for this. I'm not just, waving my hands around and trying to be, enthusiastically, blindly positive. Places like Shenzhen in China, where you have this incredible example of when you have lots of people who understand technology, lots of people who understand markets, and lots of people who understand how to make things all close by. You can move much, much, much faster and have much greater impact if you do that. I must calm down. I'm getting carried away here. Sorry, Jen.
No, I love it, and I like that you mentioned Innovate Cambridge there. I was I don't know if you were there, Tim. I was at the Innovate Cambridge Summit a few weeks ago, and it was just it was great to see. They really have covered so many bases there, obviously. And you mentioned Cambridge and Manchester, super important links there, and we've already got the likes of Arm there, and already got those connections,
Right.
and the Oxcam and the train line connecting everything. This is all super important to Cambridge. It's not just about our tiny little city or town that we've got here, but it's about all of those connections out there as well.
Right.
So wanted to ask you, so Cambridge is home. Obviously, we've mentioned some of these globally renowned, significant organisations. I just mentioned Arm, and we've spoken about CMR, and you mentioned Domino and Perkins in Peterborough. So what I'd like to talk about, so these are key sectors in advanced manufacturing. So we're talking about agri-tech and perhaps bioscience, healthcare, pharmaceuticals, digital technologies. How can we nurture those sectors to be able to make these things in the long term here?
That's a really good point. I think it is the connection between, I think there's three bits that we need to just get right. So one of them is making sure we remain in Cambridge really, really good at the science and technology. The reason AstraZeneca is here is because of the quality of the long-term development of all of those biological science activities. The fact is, you head up to Babraham and Hinxton, it's because we have this long-term consistent investment in research excellence. If that doesn't continue, then we'll slowly decline over time. So number one is getting the science and technology bit right. I think there's something very, very fundamental about making sure that those companies that want to work here get the support they need, that it's easy to do business here. And the more we make it difficult, the more likely it is people go, well, actually, yeah, there's all the science, but without this, access to the right suppliers and all the things we need to do our business well, it's going to be tough. And then thirdly, perhaps most importantly, making sure we invest in the skills.
Yeah.
I think this is where it's fantastic to see organizations like Form the Future, which are making sure that we have a constant pipeline from the schools into this world. We've got the UTC down at on the biomedical campus, making sure we've got colleges dedicated to providing the people who are going to be in those great companies. We've got to make it so that you've got the science and technology, you've got the supply and the supply chains and the ease of doing business, and you've got to know that they're going to be a good source of supply of people who can then drive the growth of your business forward. And if you've got all those things, Cambridge is a very logical place to base any high-tech manufacturing business. If any one of those wobbles slightly, we really are at risk. I mean, that's my view. I don't know, Jen, do you agree?
I do agree, and I actually I'm a volunteer ambassador with Form the Future.
Oh, wonderful!
I'm very passionate about going into schools at kids of this level, and you don't know what you want to do. Most kids don't know what they want to do at 13, 14, 15, whatever it is, and that's okay. That's okay.
Yes.
But it's to show them what there is out there and why it's interesting and the people behind it. I think it's important that they see the people behind these jobs, and let them know what's available. There's so much that's driving children and students towards universities, perhaps less than there used to be. It's more, there is a lot of direction to apprenticeships and T levels and so on. But in Cambridge, there's the bar is set so high with what students can see around them. And I think at a manufacturing level, you don't have to have a degree. You don't have to have a PhD. You can still go and do these really, really worthwhile jobs, which is contributing to creating these awesome products without having that academic, that prowess that Cambridge is known for. And that's why I like going into schools. It's because I can say, look, I can do it. You can do it. And just opening it up and giving people the tools they need to choose themselves.
Right, it's a brilliant point, and this visibility of opportunity, I think, is what's really important. And there are many different career paths, and they're not unconnected. You can start off on one and move to another. There's sort of feeling that, and this is crazy about our education system in a way, that we have to make decisions aged sort of 15, 16, which seem to lock us into something for life. And you go, well, life isn't like that. And so the more we can remind people that, career paths are very wiggly, that, most people start off in one direction and then move to another direction. And that's absolutely fine. It's not that, it's a bad thing. It's actually to be encouraged, because you then get more experiences, and you can, you've made a decision once and you've moved over here, but you can always go back to this thing. Of course.
Yeah. And whilst, we know that AI is going to be taking over some jobs, it's not going to be taking over all of them. And manufacturing is one that yes, AI is going to be helping some of those processes along. We still need those hands. Literally, we need those hands on deck there. So it's a pretty safe job, really, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. There will always be, going back to how we started this, there'll always be people at the heart of manufacturing. And that's not going to change. However digital we become, however AI driven we become, think of it one way, all of those systems have to be built by someone, have to be designed by someone, have to be invented by someone. But then so many of the jobs, your visits to factories as well, you can testify to this. There's a lot of automation, There's some very smart people working out how to make the automation do what it's supposed to do.
Yeah.
That's not going to change.
Yeah, exactly. So one of the things I like, and whilst we're talking about young people here, this is really a good question. I like to talk about what people, were like when they were younger and what they would sort of tell themselves if they could go back in some kind of time machine. And you mentioned your teacher's name. Was it Mrs. Miller?
Yes, Nargis Miller.
So if you could perhaps go back, Tim, when you were at school, what would you tell yourself?
Oh, I think it partly would be that, don't worry, you don't have to decide things. You can always change your mind. And so this idea of the wiggly career, the non-linear career, I would like to have known that. And just to be reminded that there are lots and lots of different things out there, and you pick one to begin with, that does not fix you in that on a train line that you can't get off. I think that was very important. I think there's something about it's okay to make mistakes.
Yeah.
And that's one. And maybe the third one is that there are always opportunities coming along, and not always, but it's usually the default should be grab the opportunity when it's there. It might not come round again. And it's, all that stuff about, you tend to regret the things that you didn't do rather than regret the things you did do. Not always. I think those three bits I'd really like. It's that it's never a straight line. There are always opportunities out there, and actually, give it a go, because it'll probably. I think I'd like. My teachers were absolutely brilliant. So it was Mr. Froud. He was in the big class, and Mrs. Miller in the little class, and they were both really good at this. If you wanted to try something or do a different thing, they'd say, go ahead, have a go. I think I was very lucky in having that when I was young, and that's what I just wish everybody could have at school at the moment, which is have a go, give it a try. It's not about passing the exam, it's have a go, give it a try, see what happens.
Yeah, brilliant advice. Thank you for that. Now, we're rapidly running out of time here, and there's so much that we could continue to talk about. And what I really want to do is, so Tim has a bag of props with him, and we've only seen the kettle switch so far. Do we have time to see one of your superb props, Tim? Which is your favourite prop?
Well, I think one of them is, so the creativity of engineers is phenomenal, and so one of the things I like to bring out is 3D printing has the potential to transform how we make things, but often it's thought about as making little plastic things, and a very, very important technology for making prototypes and jigs and fixtures in factories. But actually it's for end products as well. Things like hearing aids, all sorts of technologies in medicine are being used for this, but it's also something that can be used for making metal structural components. And if you apply a lot of AI and design and give it to a 3D printing machine, you come up with products that don't look simple. So the thing I'm about to hold up normally would be one block of metal or a couple of bits welded together that would do its job perfectly well. But here's a 3D printed version of it, which is just, I think, absolutely beautiful. So it's worked, the computer's worked out, the algorithm's worked out that you only need to put the metal in these places here because that's where the stress is. The rest of it doesn't need metal. So why have a big sheet of metal here that's wasting a lot of time and effort to make? You just put the material where you need the material. And this to me is an example of manufacturing in the future. We're going to be much less wasteful because we'll have machines, we'll have engineers who can design things, and machines that can make things that are as beautiful and as functional as this. And it's incredibly, this is all metal component, so lightweight. But my favorite, and I think what you might be hinting at, is when you get manufacturing people working with design engineers and product engineers, you get a wonderful thing happening, which is a speeding up of the process of innovation. And it's, you know this one, Jen, because you had to hold it at that talk. But, it isn't, for those who can't see it, here's an early mobile phone. It's taking up the entire screen. It is the size of a car battery and about the same weight. So that's from the 1980s. And again, manufacturing engineers, that's quite heavy, got that. And they said, we
give
can
your
make
biceps to work out.
Okay, indeed. We can make it smaller. We can make it like this. And that's the size of a paperback book. And interestingly, this was manufactured in the UK. You don't see that so much now.
No, you don't.
Smaller and smaller and smaller. So I always like to just go through a quick collection of phones through all the different sizes. And there's one, again, for those who can't see the screen, I'm holding up now a Nokia 3310, I think it is.
Snake.
Yes, which played the wonderful snake game. Everybody of a certain age remembers this phone so well. But to go from big car battery size one to this one is
Yeah.
manufacturing engineering at the highest level, because it's got all the same functionality and more in something a tenth of the size. And then the last one is bringing along this one here, which is now so tiny. I'm holding it sideways. It looks like a pen. I turn it this way. It's even smaller than the other Nokia, but it's much higher level of, much thinner, much better level of functionality. Internet advice from the early 2000s, quite extraordinary. So to go from this mighty monster to this tiny little device here, that's what 30 years of manufacturing engineering looks like in the real, no, less, about 25 years
Yeah.
of manufacturing engineering. So that's what it's about. It's about improving, it's about making things better and making better things.
And mobile phones are evolving because they seem to be getting bigger again. I can't find one quite small enough to put in my pocket anymore. But no, thank you for showing us that. Again, if you're listening, we'll pop some photos up so you can see those. So thank you so much for joining us today, Tim. I really, really appreciate it. And hopefully, I really, really hope that people are going to want to go out, read, listen to your book, explore a little bit more about manufacturing and some of the roles out there for people. Yeah, just want to thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me along and for a thoroughly enjoyable discussion. Thank you.
Oh, I'm glad you've enjoyed it. And everybody else, thank you for joining in. If you've listened to us or watched us today, please don't forget to write a review. We'd love to get some reviews there. And if you've got any questions, pop them in the notes as well. I can pass anything on to Tim. Yeah, thank you so much for listening. Go out and buy Tim's book, listen to his book. I'm certainly going to do that. And hopefully everybody is going to join us again soon. Cheerio.
This has been the Project Cambridge podcast.